Good evening, I am so glad to be with you tonight again. I'm also glad that we can discuss another topic, which is the most complex kilogram in the universe. That one, or approximately 1.5 kilogram, is basically the main structure in our human brain. It contains two hemispheres, left and right, the extended marrow, the space between the hemisphere, etc. We see gyruses and sulcuses that make our brain significantly larger in size. Brain is the center of all our intellectual capabilities and capacities that move the entire human body. You can also see ventriculus, that is the centers of various brain structures. Thus, we are dealing with an extremely complex system that we can now analyze. Human brain is the only organ capable of analyzing itself. It is the sole organ in the universe capable to explore its own functions. When looked under microscope, human brain shows countless structures like those found in complex mechanisms. There are modern methods that help us visualize our brain. Thus we can photograph blood veins and other structures that make up human brain. The science has made great advances in the last 10 years. The largest number of Nobel Prize winners come from the field of neurology. When we look at those brain cells called neurons, we notice their highly complex structures. If we are to compare human brain to a laptop, we would find striking similarities, yet many differences as well. There are chips in our brain and there is communication between our cerebral nerve cells. Just as signals go between computer chips, so do our nerve or cerebral cells make nerve connections and exchange electronic or biological signals. It is of prime importance to explore cerebral blood circulation system. It contains blood veins which are mutually separated. Thus, if a blood clot occurs in one of our cerebral blood vessels, it results in various disorders that cause heart failures. If there comes a clog or clot in the embolus, such as a blockage, and that blockage would cut off nutrition to the upper parts of the brain, which results in hemorrhage and brain failure. So we have a very sensitive blood networks in our brain. Human brain is protected by bones. Here we see skull bones which protect inner structures of the brain. Besides the bone structure, there are layers called dura mater, pia mater, the arachnoid villi. So dura mater, pia mater, arachnoid villi. There is a liquor that fluctuates between those layers. You see that arrow pointing to liquor flow direction. Actually, our brain is floating. That is why various hits that come to the central nervous system get amortized. For that reason, a boxer can receive hits for several years without having any serious disorders. That depends on how hard those blows are and how adaptable he is to them. Our nervous system is composed of nerves, central nervous and peripheral nervous systems. Here we see the spinal nerves or spinal nerves that form our spine cord and other structures. Each part of human body has a nervous network. For that reason, each nervous signal reaches our brain, and our brain also responds by giving orders to our organ how to react. The buildup of spinal cord and nervous system starts in embryonic form of human body. Here we see how nerves grow in the entire hand. That process of our nervous system awakening is done in the following way. This is the beginning of a hand, and these are structures that form nerves. And we see that these neurons, nerve cells, by having a capacity to smell, find their own place in our hand. So there are sensible cells in human nerves, and they find their spot during the growth of nerves. In such a way, our entire organism develops its nervous network. When we take a look at human body, we can speak of it as of a great machinery. It is like a robot, but unlike robots, it is far more perfect. Human gestures are very flexible and precise, so we can clearly make a difference between a man-made machine and the perfect machinery that human organism is. Those are specific structures that we can indeed analyze. In the next several minutes, we shall devote our time to see our cerebral structures and notice what is that builds up our brain. We're going to see which elements have favorable influence on brain functions and how they all come together. First, we see these base cells, and then we see the spinal ones. They form our brain, while other cells form columns or small pillars. We see those small cerebral cells climbing over spinal ones and form cerebral mass. There are some cerebral cells which travel to their respective places in the form of a caravan. These are surrounded by supportive cells. We need to tell the difference between supportive and cerebral cells and their roles in building up our brains. Supportive cells play a very important role indeed. We see here astrocytal glial cells that are really support to the brain. These are our cells intellectuals. Entire nutrition, glucose, energy reaches brain through supportive cells. Also, the brain eliminates metabolism byproducts through them. That entire process is being done through these supportive cells. So we see that we have cells intellectuals and those cells that supplies our brain cells with all they need. Nervous cells, as we see on the graph, have formed particular areas. Those areas are in charge of motor movements, senses, etc. They rule different aspects of our organism. See here, seeing area. This is seeing area in our brain, and that area is in charge of our sight. Our brain contains a complete projection of our body. The projection can be sensitive or motor one. It is the same system as the one we have for video presentations. Projector sends off light signals to the wall and we see a picture. Now the same process happens in our organism. There is so-called Penfield's little man. It is presented in a way you can see on the graph. Some parts of our bodies have more sensitive receptors, which make them more outstanding. So if we stimulate one part of our brain, say this yellow area, we will have a sense of warmth in our index finger. That means that each part of our body is recorded in the brain in the form of that little man. Therefore, there is a projection of our body in the brain. Just as there is a sensory little man, there is also a motor little man. For example, human eyes are one of those outstanding parts of the central nervous system. They are amazing organs. Optic nerve conveys all the signals in our eyes. That nerve has about 1 million tissues. It transfers the signals to the seeing area of the brain. Note that seeing veins cross with one another. The veins cross with one another, and that is called optic chiasmic, where seeing veins cross. On a molecular level, the central nervous system can function due to cerebral or nerve cells. Those cells have extensions, dendrites and axons. Those are the cells within our brain. They occupy exact symmetric space. The number of communication between those nerve cells is particularly important so that our entire brain structure can function properly. Each one of us has biological currencies. On the graph you see a method which is used to explore those currencies called electroencephalographology. We have recorded waves found in the brain. The brain also sends information to the muscles in order to move them. So there is motor area in charge of muscle movements. Axons or extensions are there to convey all those signals at the right time in the right spot. We have biological currencies in our bodies, as I've said. We know that electric currencies move machines, and that currency moves machines, but likewise we do have biological currencies that flow through our nerves. Now, what might happen if there is a short circuit? Is there such a thing as in our nerves? Well, no, it is impossible because there is an isolation. That isolation protects cerebral cells. It is called Schwann's cell. It envelopes the nerve. Since it is made up of fat, of lipids, it presents a perfect isolator. Without that isolation, there would be a short circuit. For example, epileptic attack imitates short circuit. But here the signals are conveyed through conduits, which are Schwann's cells. Those cells transfer impulses from one narrow entrance to the other. The entire white mass in our brain is built of isolation material. That isolation prevents short circuit in our nerves. When we take a closer look at those layers, we see that they are held by the following buckles. They're protein buckles, and they make it impossible for Schwann's cells to disband. Thus, our central nervous system is perfectly isolated in its entirety. Signals are transferred from one nerve to the other through these synaptic gaps. That means there is no direct contact between nervous cells. There is a chemical mediator which transfers the signal from one to the other nerve cell. So there is no physical contact between the cells. The center of their communication is called synapses. Signals in synapses are transferred chemically. Here we see how is that done in reality. We see two nervous cells on the graph. The impulse is coming from the upper one and needs to be transferred to the lower one. If looked at closely, we notice an empty space called synaptic gap. Chemical mediators in this bag with chemical conduits are found in the upper cell. Once the impulse comes to the surface, an impulse is action potential, these connections in chemical conduits are released. Those chemical substances, like keys in the lock, are transferred to the next nervous cell, and then the impulse is being transferred further. That is the way information is passed, and it illustrates the speed with which it is passed from one nervous cell to the other. If this were to occur just once in lifetime, we would have been able to move just one single gesture. However, this process is reversible, so the chemical mediators return, and when the next impulse is being shot, that information is passed on to the next nervous cell. That is how information is passed along the entire nervous system. Chemical mediators fit into these receptors just as a key fits into a door. Only specific chemical conduits fit. Only specific chemical conduits, indeed. It only fits and gets attached to the receptor. That is how information is being passed within the central nervous system. When we look through a microscope, we see these bubbles that get released in a very complex process. There is a permanent flow of chemical mediators and constant flow of electric stimulations. One physiologist stated, he said, the venues that are often activated are being strengthened in many ways. So if these nervous signals are often passed, they strengthen connections between nervous cells. In such a way, many more connections can be formed among nervous cells. Greater number of connections and greater number of synapses among the cells result in better intellectual power and better functions of the nervous system. Our brain receives 100 million messages in 1 second. It receives information about warmth, quality of a picture, whether our shoes fit or not, and many other information. brain is not able to accept all those information at the same time, so it has a filtering system for all incoming messages. Reticular formation in our brain is in charge of filtering information according to their importance. If we are at a traffic light, it is certain that the information about car speed on the road and the light on the traffic light is more important compared to other information. So this reticular formation takes care of that filtering of information coming into our brain. Brain development is quite accelerated in embryonic form. 3 weeks after conception, there is 250,000 cells developed in 1 minute. Also, in the first year of child's life, the brain gets enlarged 3 times as much. The size of brain is 0.23 square meters, while there is 1,000 kilometers of connective tissue in each square centimeter. So it is more important what sort of communication is there among nervous cells than how many nervous cells are there. And you see that this connecting tissue is just huge. 1,000 kilometers in each square centimeter. Our brain's potential is just enormous. Several volumes of books can be consumed and accepted by human brain. Yet we use just a tiny bit of our cerebral functions. When we see the specific structure in our brain, we see gyruses and sacchuses, these uneven areas that make our brain larger in size. So we can analyze our brain. Encyclopedia Britannica claims that man is endowed with far greater potential compared to what can be achieved in a personal lifetime. So, we have much greater potential than we cannot even use in our lifetime. And then the question is, what is the use of such a vast potential? Jack Fincher stated about the brain. That is in fact the sole example of species supplied with an organ it has not yet learned how to use. So there is a brain, and yet we don't use it 100%. What is the use of our brain? Here is what the evolution says about our brain. Natural selection is carried out in small stages, wherefore each stage needs to pass on the evolution object at least one minimal but significant advantage. Well, what is the advantage of having a brain we cannot use? Well, in that case, it has no purpose whatsoever, and here we see that our brain actually denies the evolution theory. There is not even a little advantage passed on because we do not use all the functions innate to our brains. In 1976, Richard Dawkins stated, "Everything that has evolved by the process of natural selection should be selfish by nature." And indeed, we do see egoism and selfishness in nature, in which there is the struggle for survival. Now, man resembles that egoism more and more. However, where does altruism in us come from? If we let someone else take our parking space, we won't have a place to park a car, for example. You see, any form of altruism is diametrically opposite to the theory of evolution. Helping a friend or relative automatically reduces the changes and chances to survive, and automatically we have a greater number of it reduces the possibility to have a greater number of descendants. And so where does altruism come from? Where does come that desire to help others? According to natural selection and the theory of evolution, there should be no altruism in human species. Here we see a chart of inner parts of the brain. Those parts are in charge of many bodily functions. The central part is in charge of recognizing facial features. We usually say that we forget people's names, but we do remember their faces. Well, you see, we remember because of this huge center that allows us to recognize faces. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that we are social beings. We need communication and contact with one another. Those biological currencies that make possible our cerebral functions can work because of natrium, kalium, and transferring of action potential. Those action potential react as all or nothing. Once that signal is ignited in one spot, it goes to the end of the nerve. At the end of the nerve, there is chemical mediators which come into play. As we said, those chemical mediators get connected as keys into locks. And now, when we take a look at our cerebral central nervous system, we notice a balance between chemical substances such as NA, non-adrenaline, which stimulate the central nervous system, and GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, that inhibit cerebral functions. That means that we find ourselves in balance between stimulating and inhibiting chemical substances. And that is how we keep the balance and function throughout our lifetime. However, different circumstances remove that balance very often. For example, when we see a snake, adrenaline goes up and causes chemical reactions in the brain. The reaction is be afraid or run away. We often say that our adrenaline is too high when someone gets on our nerves, or when we are ready for an action, and so forth. And that is when we have reaction to fear or run away. How many of us have not been exposed to stressful situations at work or in the traffic? Everyone has experienced that. Even when we are to visit a doctor, we feel so unpleasant. Even medicine staff feels uneasy before surgery. All such situations can create different stressful factors. Now, stress is something positive because it elicits quicker and more effective work. But if stress factors come up too frequently, we experience different kinds of disorders. For example, we get into post-stressed conditions. Not only that, but too much stress can cause depression, anxiety, tension, worry over what will happen to us in future life. Any of us can experience those conditions. It is considered that 75 to 90% of visits to doctors derive from stress. That is a huge percentage. When we add bad nutrition habits, we can easily conclude what are the major causes for illnesses. Stress can influence adrenaline release, as we have already said. That in turn causes faster heartbeats and stronger heart contractions. Then stress hormones are being released and they narrow our body vessels. And that is so important because then the pressure goes up, which causes heart and cerebral illnesses. So the stress hormones narrow blood vessels. You might have had a way of hearing, or you might have heard a saying that the strong word killed a man. What happened there? For example, he had a clog in blood vessels or heart, and in a stressful situation there was narrowing of the blood vessel. That narrowing caused the fat layers to break down, which ceased blood circulation. As the result, there was heart or brain failure and person died. So bad word killed her or him. So the blood vessel got narrowed. There was a breakdown of the layer, and due to lack of blood circulation or oxygen, death occurred. That is what stress can cause. Stress can also cause faster breathing, which is shallow, and it enlarges bronchial tract. That in turn causes hyperventilation with tetania. Stress also reduces blood supply to digestive tract. In that case, what happens is centralization of blood circulation, which is directing blood to vital organs. When we want to react, the most important is that we have enough blood in vital organs, such as heart, brain and kidneys. Since digestive organs are not vital, they suffer as a result of that. Stress is also the major cause of intestinal malfunctions. Stress also causes blood clogging, which can have tragic results since a blood clot is formed in the blood vessel and can have the same effect as when the layers in the blood vessels break down. Such situation can bring about different heart and cerebral illnesses. How can stress manifest on peripheral vascular disorders? That is how it affects blood circulation. That is the question. Well, first of all, it causes cold arms and feet. It also narrows brain blood vessels, causing frequent headaches. Sweat glands intensify their work. The level of glucose in blood is raised, and because of that blood sugar increase, there comes a proclivity to diabetes. That is because glucose is needed as a quick energy source. Sugars and glucoses use energy faster than any other. But sugar level in blood is also increased, so the effect can be dangerous to our health. Stress hormones cause T cells reduction. T cells are in charge of our immune system. Immune cells protect us from infections. Due to redirections, T cells reduce their activities when stress factors are increasingly at work. T cells function is deactivated in those cases, and a person is more susceptible to viral infections. Stress hormones also tighten our blood vessels. They cause diabetes and asthma complications. Those are possible consequences of stress indeed. Also, there is another effect, which is a greater urination or defecation. This causes intestinal irritations, which in turn cause insomnia. Stressed out persons have the following characteristics. They suffer from all kinds of emotional problems, which are anxieties, depressions, and phobias. Secondly, rational problems, whereas they cannot remember things and often cannot go to sleep. Now those are things that can be triggered by stress. We ourselves often create stressful situations. We play with fire or with snake. We play bingo or sport bids. And here is an example on how we can create stressful situations. The following is a quote from United States Health Service Department, which says the following. As far as it is known, no bird has ever tried to make more nests than its neighbors. No fox has ever bothered for having just one den to hide in. No squirrel has ever died from worrying that it has not stored enough food for all the winters to come, and no dog has ever been plagued with insomnia because he has not saved enough bones to chew in his old age. Yet how many people ended up in psychiatric institutions because of aforementioned conditions? And how many of us are worrying about those same things? So you see, we ourselves create some of those stressful conditions. There are 100,000 billion cells in our body. Brain itself has 100 billion cells. Chemical mediators function as keys for the locks. And now we are going to see how we can preempt stressful situations. Today, sedatives are recommended all over the place. They supposedly reduce stressful situations. Now let us see how benzidine, which is most frequently used in our country, affects the brain. Chloride channels should be open, and sedative is to work in these spots for a person to calm down. That is so that GABA substances that calm our bodies can be triggered. How can we calm down our body? Well, by having GABA working as a key in the lock. Chloride channels are opened and we get calm. For GABA to work, this sedative receptor has to be engaged. That is why the sedative has to fit into its receptor. And then GABA mechanism gets activated and chloride channels are opened and then we get calmed down. The question is, how come that we have sedative receptors when sedatives had been invented 20 years ago? What is the function of those receptors that have been there for several thousand years? What is going on in our bodies? Is there a natural way by which we calm down in stressful situations? Scientists have done various experiments, and here is one. A 1995 study by Dartmouth Hitchcock Medicine Center reveals something. Connection between religious experience and survival of patients that have gone through a surgery. Those patients survived heart surgery. What is religious experience? Well, it is not going to church and ritual manifestations. What is religious experience really? Religion comes from word re and legare. Re means again, and legare means buckle. So buckle up again with who? With the one who created all these fantastic mechanisms he does. So the patients with that religious experience had more chances to live on. Atheists were 3 times more likely to die compared to theists. Further experiments have shown that men and women that confide in a higher force have twice less chance to die from coronary arterial disorders. Now that is very interesting. A study of 30 female patients recovering from hip fracture has shown that those who had the higher power as their source of strength and comfort got back on their feet much quicker and experienced less depression compared to those who did not. So these are different experiments. Communication with the Creator brings about slower heart rate, breathing and cerebral waves. Muscles get relaxed and the effects of noradrenaline, which increases in stressful situation. So the effects of noradrenaline and other stress-related hormones are reduced. Studies have shown that application of communication caused 75% of patients that suffer from insomnia to sleep better, while 34% of those that suffer chronic pain reduced analgesic medicine intake. These are quite interesting bits of information. Also, communication works in the same biochemical patterns as relaxation response. It affects noradrenaline and other message carriers of stress hormones, thus reducing blood pressure, and it reduces heart rate and reduces blood pressure, so it also brings about other good effects. That is what Dr. Herbert Benson from Harvard said. In his research, he found neurohomologue connection between our nervous system and immune system. He found that those who have a certain level of spirituality have greater chance to survive. Anything related to meditation and mental conditions control and that which changes hormone activities can potentially affect the immune system. So it is important to improve our immune system. This said David Felton from Neurobiological Department at Rochester University. I also want to quote another neurologist who said, the ability to have a religious experience has its base in neurons and atoms, said Ron Joseph, neurologist from Palo Alto Medicine Center. Many will say that is a pure placebo effect. And do you know what is placebo effect? That happened 30 years ago. There was a female patient who was pregnant and she constantly experienced drive to throw up. Doctors wanted to help her, so they gave her medicine. However, they made a mistake, and instead of giving her medicine that prevents, they gave her one that induces throwing up. Nevertheless, the woman stopped throwing up. What does that mean? Well, the effect of that medicine was based on psychological inducement. From that day, effect was named placebo effect. We see it with those who visit doctor and they complain about all kinds of problems. But when they get prescribed pill, their problems disappear, even though the pill may contain nothing more than a sugar. But there is that psychological connection, you see, that psychological component which allows even healing to take place. Many say that it is a placebo effect, these things that we have quoted from doctors. They say it is a psychological effect that comes out of confidence. Now another experiment was carried out. Randolph Bird from San Francisco General Hospital did the following. He selected 393 patients from Coronary Hospital Care Unit and asked religious people to mediate on behalf of half of those patients. In order to eliminate placebo effect, he did not tell the patients about the experiment. So they had no idea that it was going on. Bird has established that those that nobody mediated for had 5 times greater need for antibiotics and were 3 times more likely to experience health complications. So what is the point? Communication, even with the Creator, is today totally compromised. Many have abused those terms and have polluted them. They have polluted everything related to religious experience, everything related to Creator, and the complex mechanisms that are there in our organism and are related to the fact that they were made at once with no evolution. But here we are talking about experiments. And the experiments show that those patients that have some sort of religious experience, as well as those that someone had mediated for, had improved health. Now that proves that connection with the Creator, that establishing of the connection with the Creator leads to psychological health of a person. We humans have disconnected from the Creator and we don't want to have communication with Him. For that reason we are constantly degrading. However, those who establish that communication experience health benefits. So we can establish the balance of chemical elements in our brain by medicine, by sedatives. Now, as a physician, I am not against medicine at all. Human lifespan has been greatly expanded by average 20 years due to antibiotics. However, from all the proofs, we see that there are natural methods in us that we can use to eliminate stress. Experiments on dogs and cats have also shown that they have very specific endorphins, and you know that morphine is used when people suffer from much pain. When they have cancer, morphine is given to eliminate pain, since it is the strongest analgesic. However, it has been established that cats and dogs have innate endorphins that eliminate pain. So the Creator has taken care that even animals should not feel the pain with such intensity. So human body also has natural endorphins that are released. We have seen that sedatives have natural receptors in our body. Those receptors have been there for thousands of years. So, there are natural sedatives we possess that can calm us. We need to change the course of our thinking. We need to help those around us. We need to get engaged in physical work. In that way we can eliminate stress factors and not use sedatives too often. Why? Well, because sedatives work as cancerous mutations and teratogenic matters. That is, they can cause mutations, cancer, and embryonic deformities. The most recent studies have shown that and proved that very clearly. We can use medication, that is for sure, but there are natural ways to preserve our bodies. We possess mind. Due to mind and central nervous system, we differ from other species. So we have to think, how did this central nervous system come about? We have seen that there are isolators, nervous cells that transfer electric and biological impulses, and that there are chemical mediators, groups of cerebral cells in charge for motor functions and muscle movements. We have also seen that there is a reticular formation that filtrates stimulations which come from the environment. There is also a phenomenal system that protects our brain. The same happens with computers. You have to protect your PC from moist, rust, and many other factors. Our central PC is protected from all that. We can swim and have sport activities because our central nervous system is safe. It floats, and its liquor amortizes all hits and movements. Cerebral cells have specific functions. They create synapses, mutual communication lines. We are able to reason. We are intelligent beings. How could those perfect structures come about? The evolution theory has no explanation about these systems. Why? Because it claims that they evolved gradually, step by step. Yet the lack of any such system is impossible. If Schwann's cells were not there, or axons, or liquor, or supportive cells, a lack of total nervous system can only cause death. Therefore, it is absolutely ruled out that our nervous system came about gradually. Could cerebral cells create nervous system on their own? Could they associate and say, let us create the nervous system? No, certainly not, because cells have no brain. They are not conscious beings. They could not create these kind of complex structures. Could a man create those complex structures? Only now we are getting into analyzing the workings of our brain. Many years will go by before we get acquainted with the majority of functions of our brain. We are not even aware of how it works. If we were, we would have created computers to work by the same principles. No computer can do all that our brain is capable of. So not only man could not create the brain, but the man even does not know his own brain. Man uses only a small part of potential that is in the brain. An intelligent being created this perfect brain. That being knows the function and structure of the entire human body. It was all created in one moment, thus we are able to identify our creator as opposed to sliding back and saying that we have common ancestors with apes. How did our brain develop? It was a creative act on the part of our creator. And now that we have seen all these perfect structures, and now that we can see them at work, we wonder what is the purpose of our higher brain structures. One of the greatest mathematicians in the 16th century, and one of the greatest minds of all times, Pascal, said that there is vacuum in us that cannot be filled by anything that man's hand has created. Only Creator can fill that vacuum and make us happy. And truly, there is a vacuum in us, and we cannot function without having communication with the Creator, because we then slide into degeneration. One astute philosopher classified people in the following manner. The first group are those called pneumaticos, people of the spirit, ideal people who think. For science is nothing more than applied logic. Those people think and get to know where they come from, where they are going, and why they are here. The other group of people are psychikos. Those are not as ideal as the first group, but they think, they ask questions, but do come not to right answers. The third group is made of those called sarsinos. They are carnal people, hedonists, those who eat, drink and get merry and worry not what might happen tomorrow. Most people live like that today. And there are those called sarsikos, meaning animal humans. They only live by instincts, just like other animals, or like amoebas. All that amoeba needs is a bit of glucose and multiplication and nothing else. And there are those on this earth who live just like that. All they do is eat and have sex and nothing else. So that is just a classification. People can also be classified by their characters, and that is what is important, not the skin color and the team we support. Those two classifications are relevant for our future life. We are trying here to respond to the most crucial questions on the earth. We are not talking about peripheral things, such as how frogs breathe or how many legs does a spider have and so on and so forth. We are interested in existential questions. We need correct answer to the question, what is our origin, why are we here below, where are we going and why? We must give answers to those basic existential questions. If we have the correct answer about our origin, we will have correct answers for all the other questions. If it is true that the Creator created each cell in us and that He wants to have communication with us, then death has been conquered as our enemy. For the Creator who created us once is able to recreate us. That is the basic and essential issue. But now the question is whether we have formed a character. Do we belong to the first group of people, or to the last group, wherefore we live and function only by instincts such as animal species do? So it depends on us which side we are going to take. It is the least problem for the Creator to recreate each human being. If scientists who have been involved in science for 20 years are able to clone and make identical human beings, is that a problem for the Creator, who has a data bank, genetic code for each one of us, to create us again? The main problem today is of moral nature, because nobody wants to have communication with Creator. If we change the way we think and therefore change the concept of life, that will be the opportunity for us to continue living with the Creator, and when He, the Creator, renovates the earth and His creation. Yet, the most important question is, how do we live today? Imagine a drunkard. If you tell him that we are going out to a picnic tomorrow and that we'll be in the nature, he would say that he couldn't care less about flowers and trees, but that he needed what he is used to: cellar, pub, his buddies, much smoke and darkness. And try to imagine how Creator can recreate such a man. Such a man finds no beauty in nature. He wants his own company. Criminals will see again their old friends. We tend to justify people, and so we see that we are on a constant moral downslide. Because there is a human nature law which says that we become that what we see. That is why it is important that we explore everything around us. I will repeat what John Chrysostom said. He said that when we receive money, we count it. Yet when we receive information pertaining to eternal life, we receive it with closed eyes and receive other people's opinions without checking them. We need to check any information, for these are essential questions that our further life depends on. That is the main point of the series Wonders of the Past through Scientific Prism. By analyzing the past, we have reached conclusions that first, there are no transitional forms, that there are no molecular forms that can make higher forms of beings, even man. We also concluded that the climate on the planet Earth was totally different several thousands of years ago. We talked about pre-flood degeneration, that only 8 people survived, and that other nations came out of those 8 people. We have seen that Creator wants to communicate, and He communicated with pre-flood generation. He wants to tell us the same thing today. We have also seen that fossil records prove there was a huge global catastrophe in the past. We have much evidence about universal flood, such as canyons and fossil record, where we see that there had been no gradual fossilization process. Today, there is only 1% of organisms compared to the number of living species before the flood, so we can analyze any scientific aspect and reach quite clear conclusions. Speaking of evolution development, what is the purpose of the 5% development of our brain? There is no purpose. What is the use of medieval alchemists creating one chip when there is no other computer technology? So we see that claims about transitional and gradual developments have no logic, no scientific support, nor is there support for that in the fossil record. Therefore, we can reach definite and clear conclusions. We can also see that ancient nations had excellent preventive medicine. We can prove mosaic writings by genetics, paleontology, biology, and any other way. By all those methods we can prove that the author of Moses' books was absolutely knowledgeable about all those disciplines and that his sayings are absolutely true. For today, under the close scrutiny of the science, all incorrect theories can be debunked. Today, we see that every month there is a new theory about cells, its structures, etc. We see that those historical records are not true. But we see that medicine and science 300 years ago cannot be compared to the medicine and science that Jews applied 3,000 years ago. How did they get the idea to check coagulation factors, immune system, etc.? How did they get the idea to make quarantines? Where did they get healthy nutrition from? Where did they get the idea about healthy nutrition? Contemporary medicine is only today discovering the importance of healthy food and all the things we have covered in this seminar. Where did they have the idea about sterilization and disinfection? They did not know about microorganisms. Microorganisms are first mentioned in 1836 as the primary cause of illnesses. We see that Creator is interested in all peoples. He is interested in us today, but sadly there is a horrible lack of interest for these questions that we have covered today. We can reach the right conclusions only by researching. Searching is the most important thing. We cannot come to the answers if we don't search for them. So I want to invite you, start searching and search all of these issues. You will be able to also to get literature at the exit. Thank you for your attention, not only for tonight, but thank you for your attention in the last 4 evenings. I hope that the lectures were pleasant to your ears, and now you can ask me some questions.